I've done hundreds of interviews, mock interviews, leak code problems, and anybody that studies for coding interviews enough is going to start questioning, is this really the best process? Personally, I've gone through some of these harsh rejections where I've interviewed at companies for a month straight, passing every portion of the interview only to get beaten out by another candidate. And this happens to the best of us. Just because you fail a certain portion of the technical interview or they select another candidate for that position, it doesn't mean you're any worse of a programmer. In fact, you could be the better programmer. This is because the technical interview process at big tech companies has been optimized to avoid false positives, even if that means losing false negatives. If you don't know what I'm talking about, a false positive is a candidate that is unqualified for the job that will get past the interview, so they will get hired. And a false negative might be someone like you or me who gets rejected even if they are qualified for that position. So these companies aren't necessarily worried about losing out on good candidates as long as they don't hire a bad candidate. I think that just comes down to a time commitment thing, because if you hire a bad candidate accidentally, it's going to take some time to notice that, then you're going to have to fire them, and then you're going to have to go through the rehiring process, retraining process, and it's just a big waste of time. But it does kind of seem like there's this problem that has been here for years now, that there's this laziness excuse for, like, oh, well, these tech companies, they don't have the time to curate the interview for each candidate, right? There's thousands of candidates, and the engineers will get assigned people to interview, and it's just, everyone's too busy. Everyone's too busy to, look at your skill set a little bit more seriously. While the technical interview process varies from company to company, it is usually pretty similar. It'll usually involve 2 to 3 sections of algorithms and data structures based coding interview questions. There will be a section dedicated to behavioral portion to make sure you're good at communicating, you're a good person, and you're a culture fit for the company. And there may also be 1 or 2 sections dedicated to systems design. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that this technical interview process is the most unfair thing of all time. However, I do think improvements could be made. But before I talk about the flaws and what could be improved, I do want to talk about how I think about the process in my mind and why it might be kind of like this. As I was studying computer science in college and I had to prep for these technical interviews, I kind of felt a similar vibe to when I was in high school studying for the SATs. You see, everybody takes the SAT in the United States, and it's a big determining factor for what college you'll go to. If you score well on the SAT, you can get into some of the top universities in the country. And if you score poorly on the SAT, you might have to go to a local college or a community college. And people's success on the SAT is often determined by hard work and preparation. You sit and you do those practice tests and practice problems over and over, hoping that on the new test that you have to take, you're going to run into those same problems or very similar problems and know how to solve them. This is very similar to the technical interview process and these algorithms, data structures, coding problems in my eyes, because if you put in the hard work and preparation and you get good and you could solve these problems, you can get into a top company. And if you don't, then you might have to end up working at a local company or a startup, a smaller company. So it does kind of make sense in my eyes, because universities get applications from millions and millions of students, and they need some kind of standardized test to have a metric to determine, hey, this person might be a good fit for our university. And the same is happening with big tech companies, where they've developed this standardized test or interview process where we have scores, and that might determine if you're going to be successful at the company. That's just always how I thought of this technical interview process while I'm preparing. However, on the other hand, just because you get a bad score on an SAT doesn't mean you couldn't thrive in the university and go on to do amazing things. And just because you score poorly on a coding interview doesn't mean you could go work at the big company and make great achievements. There is absolutely a major skill gap between solving coding interview questions and the things you're going to have to do at a real world job. And I think this is the major issue that a lot of people have. There are so many brilliant programmers that have expertise with a multitude of technologies and building full stack applications that may get rejected just because they can't solve these simple coding interview questions. And this talented programmer might be 10 times better for the position, but somebody else might get hired because they score higher on the coding interview. This seems a little bit unfair nowadays, where algorithms and coding interview questions are just weighted a little bit too heavily. Everybody knows the technical interview process consists of algorithms with data structures questions now, and it really is just a hard work preparation thing, like I explained. But some people don't have the time for this preparation, and it is a little bit unfair that they have to put in 100 hours studying for these technical interviews, even though the material they're learning might not correlate to the job at all. In my opinion, any programmer can get good at these algorithms with data structures questions if they just put in the hours on LeetCode. If you just sit there and you do LeetCode over and over and over and over. So if we all know that, then I think that algorithms and data structures questions might be weighted a little bit too heavily nowadays. And while I'm not saying get rid of these sections for these questions altogether, I think we might want to replace one of the sections or add a new section for real world experience in coding. Can you make a request from the front end to the back end, get some data, display it to the page? Or can you do some data compression and then store that into a database? Another section interviews could incorporate is maybe looking into all of the different technologies you know, like maybe you know things like ChatGPT or low code, no code. As a web developer, does it really matter if you know algorithms and data structures, or is it more important that you know the tools and technologies you need to know to get your job done? Side note, if you are a web developer, there's a new no code platform that came out called Wix Studio, and it's extremely powerful when it comes to web development, web design. There's AI responsiveness and pre-built animations and stuff. It's really cool. So whenever I get the chance, I just like to mention that. Check it out. I'll link it in the description. Startups, for example, a lot of the time, they actually do curate the technical interview process to you and your skills or the position that you're applying to, because they have the time to do that. They could sit down with you one-on-one because they need good people on the team. It feels good knowing that if you get rejected for a role, it's because you weren't a good fit for the role, not because you couldn't solve algorithms and data structures questions. But I do sincerely believe that the interview process is a work in progress. If we look back in the day, they used to give out silly logic puzzles and basically trick questions that I don't think would have any correlation to you being a good software engineer. And so while nowadays they do have this structure, more standard thing that you can prepare for and you can get good at if you have the time, it would be nice to see the incorporation of new interview methodologies like pair programming or take-home assignments that are curated specifically to determine if you are a good fit for the role. And in that way, the best suited candidate would win rather than the person who prepared best for the coding interview. Either way, guys, the tech market is competitive. And the only way to actually beat this standardized interview process is to practice, or take a chance and apply it at a smaller startup company, because they might be more willing to give you a chance to show off your skill sets and how you're a good fit for the role. Either way, as we get older, we might be the ones interviewing people and developing these interview processes. So whatever you don't like now, maybe remember that for the future. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. This is a new channel. I'd really appreciate it. Leave some comments below, maybe some rejection stories or some things that you don't like about the interview process that seem unfair. And yeah, thanks for watching. See you guys in the next one. Peace.